So now that we've learned about what imaginary numbers are, I want to put them to use. So we can simplify the square roots of negative numbers now. In this first one, I have the square root of negative 52. And I want to express this in terms of I. What's our first step going to be? I want to break it up so that I have my negative 1. So I can rewrite this as the square root of negative 1 times 52. Now, this can be broken up into two separate square roots. So the square root of 1, negative 1, my bad, times the square root of 52. So we know that the square root of negative 1 is equal to I. So this is I. But what is the square root of 52? Well, we can look at its prime factorization to see if there's any perfect squares in there. So 52 divided by 2 would be 26. And then 26 divided by 2 is 13. And I know that 13 is a prime number, so we can't go any lower than that. So coming up here, I have the square root of negative 1, JK, we said that the square root of negative 1 is I. We have I times the square root of 4 times 13. I know what the square root of 4 is, that's 2, so I'm going to pull that guy out. And I'll have I times 2 square root 13. So I times 2 square root 13. That is technically our final answer, but you will most commonly see it written as, and my preference is to have this written as 2I square root 13. Again, neither of them are wrong, but please write it like that. So let's look at one more. Let's say you have, so this would be number 2 on your notes, 3 square root negative 16. So where am I going to start at? Like I said before, I want to have a square root of negative 1 somewhere in here. So I'll have 3 times the square root negative 1 times 16. Break this up into two square roots. 3 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 16. We don't even have to do prime factorization or anything because we know that 16 is a perfect square. So 3 times I times 4. Multiply our common fact, our like terms. 3 times 4 is 12 times I. And that's your final answer. Not too bad. So we can simplify these square roots, but we can also solve quadratics with imaginary solutions that are going to end up having imaginary solutions. Let's look at a few of those. So I want to solve each of these equations. Solve x squared is equal to negative 81. We know that if this was x squared times, let's look at this, x squared is equal to 81. We know that if it was that, we'd take the square root of both sides, and we'd have x is equal to plus or minus 9. Let's look at this one though. We have a square root, we have x squared is equal to negative 81. Still going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. That gives me the square root of x squared is x is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 81. So you're going to ask, why did I put my plus or minus here and not on the last ones? Because we're solving a quadratic now. Quadratics have two roots. I mean, most of the time we haven't got to those yet. But this one's going to have two roots. So that's why we have to make sure we have our plus or minus there to show the two roots. Let's break down the square root of negative 81. I know that that is negative 1 times 81. So I'm going to have plus or minus square root of negative 1 times square root of 81. Negative 1 is I, 81 is 9. So our final answer is going to be x is equal to plus or minus 9i I. We have both of our roots there. Let's try one more. I'm going to have 3x squared plus 75 equals 0. I'm going to start by subtracting 75 from both sides. That's going to leave me with 3x squared is equal to negative 75. And I'm going to divide both sides by 3 to get x by itself. And this is going to leave me with x squared is equal to negative 25. Because 75 divided by 3 is 25. So now I want to take the square root of both sides so I have it only an x, not an x squared. That's going to leave me with x is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 25. Let's simplify this. I know that x is equal to plus or minus the square root, negative 1 times 25. If I break that up into two square roots, I will have the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 25. That's going to give me my final answer. So I'm going to have x is equal to, I know that, I'm going to back up, sorry. Negative 1 is equal to I, square root of 25 is 5. So x is going to be equal to plus or minus 5i. So now I know you guys have a few to try on your own.